All right, thank you guys. I appreciate being here today. Wish we could be doing this in person, but I'm glad I can join and be part of this conference. So we're going to jump right into this. We'll go over a brief introduction here. If anyone's familiar with some of my other talks, I tend to have a lot of slides, so I go pretty fast, but we'll come to the end and we can ask some questions if you have anything from the presentation. So today we'll go over a brief background, kind of go through how I got to where I am today, do a little bit of professional history, why I'm in geoscience and GIS, and then kind of talk about starting Mudrock Energy. And with that, we'll move into some software packages, different things that I've worked with while here at Mudrock with continued learning, looking at different GIS packages, looking at how to visualize data, and then some specific examples with Alteryx and Unfolded Studio. And then finally, we'll wrap up the presentation, kind of going through a lot of my findings with independent employment, looking back at how it started, how it's coming, and just kind of my general thoughts moving from an E&P operator to independent employment. So we'll start with the background. And my professional background, it's really been focused in small oil and gas, private Appalachian E&Ps. And I started before, the hit of, shale. So I'm kind of saying here, I started pre-shale, shallow upper Devonian wells, vertical wells, and I've gone through peak shale, around now. So we're looking at, the peak of shale gas development. And so, working with a small company, really have a diverse experience. When you work with a small company, you're exposed to multiple disciplines. You're working with, all the land folks directly and engineering and everything from, beginning of the well all up through management and midstream. And, communication is really essential across all the departments in a small company because you don't have a whole lot of people to pick up the slack and keep going. You wear a lot of hats and have to keep moving forward. And where I met a lot of you is in my most recent role was with Arsenal managing the geology and GIS department. And so with that, let's take a step back. How did I get into GIS and geology? Well, back in high school, so this actually came before college, my classmates and I, we started our own class in environmental studies. And a big part of that was this limestone run watershed restoration project. And so with this project, we went out and we got grant funding through the state of Pennsylvania through their Growing Greener grant. So we had to write grant proposals, put this all together, get money back into our classroom. And with that money, we bought Trimble GPS units, surveying equipment, and of course, ArcGIS. And with ArcMap, we would go out, we would do measurements along the stream banks, measure erosion surfaces, map out riparian buffer zones, and build this all into an ArcGIS project. And now, one of the real important parts of this project, though, was actually then with this grant, we had to go out and publish it to the public. And so we had to get up, put together presentations and talk to the public themselves and really put out, what we're finding, what we're seeing. And, it's a big part of, data analysis and mapping is going out and presenting it to the public or your target audience. And so Limestone Run, it's a tributary to the Susquehanna River. It's a small little stream system. And it's always been classified as an impaired stream. And an important thing, about 5 years ago, they actually determined that the water is now clean enough and clear enough, has enough ecological growth that trout are now able to be in the stream. And so about 5 years ago, they actually stocked brook trout back into Limestone Run for the first time ever in its recorded history. So that's kind of an exciting update with the project there. So jump ahead about 20 years, and now we're looking at the formation of Mudrock Energy. And so I started the company back in 2020 in January. And it was a great time to start a company, right? As many of us are aware, the oil and gas industry continued its downward slide. You can kind of look over here on the right. If we look at all 2020 overall, the spud, year over year growth, Marcellus was down about a third, Utica was down 40%, and vertical wells were down about 3/4. So activity really slowed down in 2020. And, a lot of that obviously had to do with this coronavirus that was about to shut down the world. And so if we look at this another way, looking at oil and gas activity, you can look at all activity on all rigs in Appalachia. And so what this is a frequency chart of wells per week. And so, for example, here in West Virginia, back in 2020, here we had about most of the weeks, we had 7 rigs operating. But for the year average, we were about 9. And typically, when you're looking at these frequency charts, like in Ohio here, you get a nice curve around your average. Whoops, sorry, back. However, when you look at Pennsylvania, you can really see the difference in 2019 to 2020, where you can almost walk back. So we were drilling a lot of weeks here, over 45 rigs, but you really walk back all the way back to that 2020 average. And year over year, we were looking at about 32 rigs on an average week being down from 2019 to 2020. And then if we look at, commodity response and employment over the last 30 years, I've plotted here WTI, so oil price corrected for real, so corrected for inflation over the last 30 years, and looking at, the upstream employment. And so, obviously, as we were coming up to the shale, we had a lot of hiring, and then we hit the Great Recession. We had a nice little drop here, about 85,000 people. But then we recovered pretty quickly. And then we had this, what I'm calling, the shale upstream boom. And this lasted up until our about 2014 price collapse. And then as a lot of us, were wiped up in one of these next 2 downturns, about 230 upstream employees were lost after that 2014 price collapse, and another 135,000 after this, shale bust and COVID hit. So I need to take a look and see how much recovery we've had in 2021. I know there's a slight uptick here, but I don't think we've come back to where we were back in like 2018. And so it's not all negative though. As we know, in Pennsylvania and Appalachia, we've got lots of energy up here. We have coal, we have gas, we have wind, nuclear, hydro, pumped hydro. We have all kinds of energy resources here. So in the long term, I'm actually very bullish about energy in general, and of course, oil and gas in Appalachia in the long term. In the short term, we're producing around 34 BCF a day, which is a lot of gas. I mean, this is a world-class reservoir at the Marcellus and the Utica. And, I think right now we're kind of curtailed based on midstream access. But, in the long term, there's a lot of resource here in Appalachia, and I think we're going to, be pulling it out over a long period of time. And so it's still exciting to be working up here in such a prolific basin. So now, I talked about how it was, not necessarily the best time to move forward with a new company as everything's, kind of crumbling around me. But you know what it's a great time for? It's a great time for continued learning, starting to pick up new skills and learn ahead. And so, I've been using ArcGIS for about 20 years. And so I'm very familiar with ArcGIS. But one package that I had never used, but I've heard a little bit about, was QGIS. And starting a new company, I figured, you know what, let's take a look at this. And you know why? It's an open source GIS solution. So it's free. And importantly, it's got a real large online support system. So there's lots of tutorials, help centers, different things, it's out there that's all free and open to the public. And, there's lots of numerous extensions. Being open source, there's all kinds of professionals adding things to this regularly. And, digging into it, it was very, it reminded me a lot of old ArcMap. A lot of the mannerisms, the way things work, it really reminded me of the interface of ArcMap. And overall, it was, easy to use. And I did complete several early consulting projects with QGIS. So I've done some marketing and some other things, but even paid consulting jobs, I did and was successfully completed using QGIS. But looking here, I also did some marketing things. Here's an example of one of my early Baker Hughes rig reports with some charts and maps. Pulled out of QGIS and some other things. And then again, a horizontal well report here for Pennsylvania in the second half of 2020. But to be honest, again, I have that history with ArcGIS, ArcMap. I was an early adopter to ArcPro. And I was really like the user interface of ArcPro. And so within my first year, I did end up buying another Arc license. But important to note to that, with my Arc Professional Basic, I'm limited to a lot of the things that I took for granted while I was at, an enterprise platform solution where I had all the tools at my disposal. But, as we probably want to hear this, but I actually still use QGIS regularly. I couldn't justify that step up to the, more advanced level of ArcGIS. And so when I need to do a lot of the things I took for granted in ArcMap or ArcPro, I'll pull into Arc or QGIS, run all the detailed analysis with the different extensions, and then bring it back into ArcMap. And so I still use, from learning QGIS, I still use it regularly, to save some capital for my consulting company. And the other reason I really switched back to ArcPro is the ability to share easily to the online platform. Being able to create different projects and things in ArcPro, pushing it up to ArcGIS Online, creating those web applications online, and then being able to share those on my website or through other clients. It's really a powerful thing that makes ArcGIS stand out from like QGIS. Again, there's ways to do it in QGIS. It's just not near as seamless as what I found in ArcGIS. So around the same time, a big thing I was looking into is data visualization and different ways to present data. As I mentioned kind of in the beginning, when you're speaking to the public, different things, you really have to get your point across to a lot of people and make it easily. And so, personally, I believe data visualization is a key for, any professional and really anyone. If you're a student, if you're a hobbyist, really trying to, talk about what you love, you should really look into, how can I visualize this data effectively? And, in the past, there's Excel, of course, but then there's, other packages like Tableau, but we're also at a time where there's so many online resources now and so many different platforms. And one that I really use a lot and I found really intuitive is Flourish. And so it's online. You can really dump data easily. Now, one thing is they don't have a whole lot of tutorials or help associated with this, but they have a lot of templates that you can get in and really play around with a little bit and understand how they work, and then update back. And then again, for my use, it's really important to me that I can now simply publish and share interactive charts and maps directly from Flourish onto my website, and it works very intuitively. And so here's a quick example of Appalachia unconventional gas from 2020. So this is obviously not an interactive version, but on my website, you can come in here and zoom in and say, if I want to know, Encino, where their gas is coming, you can highlight on this and see all the different counties where Encino is producing. And so that's just a simple Sankey diagram. And then I use Flourish all the time. After I do, detailed analysis and other software packages, I'll pull it out and then use it in, different posts on my website, different presentations, and it's really easy to manipulate and then, kind of match your color schemes and make things interactive and easy to use. And so, you don't have to use Flourish. It's just one I found it's very helpful for me. And then, as COVID hits harder and we're moving forward and things are getting worse, software companies are starting to offer, different incentives and different things. And one thing that I found was in the spring and summer of 2020, Alteryx offered a free program, a free training program for learning their designer package. At the time, I'd never even heard of Alteryx. But I was looking ahead and I was like, what, this is a great opportunity for me to grow my analysis skills and understanding in data. And so Alteryx also teamed up with Udacity and offered free scholarships for their nano degree in predictive analytics in business. And so during the summer of 2020, I went through Alteryx, learned a lot, became core certified, and then went through this nano degree in business analytics. And overall with Alteryx, I was very impressed. I was kind of blown away with the way that, ETL and different things are handled in Alteryx, and packages similar. I had no idea how much time it could save me. And I think back to working at other operators, and you're just blown away with how much time I could have saved with a package like this. I would get into Excel or even Spotfire and run an analysis at 5 o'clock at night and let it run all night and hope it didn't crash my computer in the morning, hope it got completed. With Alteryx, I can do a very similar workflow and have it run in seconds. And sometimes, it'll take a minute or two and it feels like forever now. And so I can't even think about going back to a situation where I've got to run it overnight and hope my computer doesn't crash with analysis. But having this power, it really led me to consider, different things of like, what problems did I have in the past, at other operators and different things that now I can offer a solution for. And so one example of that is lateral spacing calculations. And so some of you may be familiar with lateral spacing calculations, but it's something that I've talked to Esri with and other service operators and other operators in general with their geoscientists, GIS professionals. And I've never really found a good answer for calculating these. But with Alteryx and GIS, I was able to, really build multiple workflows and come up with some good solutions to do this on a bulk scale. And so, the different workflows are based on the data available, a use case, and sometimes just QA, QC back and forth between them. And so here's an Ohio example where I take some public data and, if you're looking at more of a generalized lateral, we can take these in here and now I can calculate average, min, max offsets between the laterals. And this can be very important if you're looking at third-party production operations and trying to get an understanding of what's going on with the different operators. And then another workflow is if you have all the survey data, I can now do detailed lateral and stage analysis. So if we want to get a very specific distance between, say, stages, say if they're 35 and 36 here and 48 and 49 over here, we can start then looking at the spacing on a stage basis and then start pulling that in with more completions data and then do either pre-planning for your next completions job or look back at post-analysis and see if there's anything related to that, in your completion frac job. And so, there's a lot of things you can use this for: production analysis, reserve calculations, development planning, due diligence. And this is just one example, though, of using the software that you have and able to create solutions that you weren't able to in the past. And so another simpler way where I'm kind of tying a lot of this together is out on my website. I've got a weekly horizontal rig update. And with that, I'm taking the raw Baker Hughes data that comes out every Friday. I'm pulling that into Alteryx, running a workflow to come out with a handful of different things that I track and analyze and want to post. And then I'll take that, I'll push it into ArcGIS Pro, and then publish that up to ArcGIS Online, where then I have that then as a web application on my website and a few other websites where it's being shared and pulled down and utilized on a weekly basis. And while at the same time, I'll take all this different Alteryx data, push that into Flourish, and then I've got a whole lot of interactive map or charts and maps and different things that, again, people can then look at on a weekly basis. So it's nothing too complicated, but it's a way of using your software together and leveraging it and making it more effective. And so, professionals in GIS and geospatial right now are in a very great time. I mean, it feels like every couple of months, there are new great geospatial applications that are being released and coming out. I think there's about a half a dozen that I've just, been too busy to look at, but I've got a list of them that I want to check out and see if there's an application that makes sense for what I'm doing and can make my life easier or quicker and more efficient. And so one that I have found this past year that I use semi-regularly is Unfolded Studio. And so Unfolded Studio is it's an in-browser geospatial data visualization package. And it's really focused on large data sets. A a lot of the people that were in this came from Uber self-driving. And, with that, they're looking at, massive amounts of data, changing geospatial location over time, and then mapping that out. And so what I found this to be very useful for is looking at, that spatiotemporal data, space and time, and looking at how things change over time. It works very easily here in Unfolded Studio. Now, again, you can do similar things in ArcGIS, but here it's so simple, it's so fast and quick. It's pretty much a drop-in view. And for the time data, it works very nicely. Now, I still use ArcGIS for different time maps and different things, but for here, it works very simply for different visions like this horizontal drilling rigs from 2011 to 2020. And the other thing I really like for it is looking at 3D arc paths. So when you're looking at things changing locations, it works really well. And so the next couple slides go through some data I looked at for water production in Appalachia. And so here, this is Pennsylvania all water production from 2020. And what we're looking at, when you see these white spots here in the map, each one of these white spots are different wellheads. And when you have a well, it's producing water. We have flow back water, frac water coming back, and it has to be, disposed of somewhere. And so here, each one of these arcs is showing where it's going from the wellhead to the disposal facility. And then, simply and quickly in this analysis, you can then have these hexagons sum it up and show where it's gone and the quantity associated with it at each disposal facility. And so this was all use. And then you can really start calling out different things. And so for here, an example, this is a northeast PA operator. And so you can see here, we've got this network of water treatment, and you can tie that geospatially with the water flow from well to the end facility. And you can look at this by different operators. So here, this is the northeast operator. It's got a really small geospatial footprint. We've got a local footprint of the wells and the disposal facilities. We compare that to a western PA operator. This is a much broader operational footprint. Water is being shipped across the basin and into neighboring states. And finally, another one up here in northern Pennsylvania, it's got a broader operational footprint, maybe a little narrower than the western PA operator. But you can also see that their network is shipped right along that northern corridor and I-80. And so, each one of these networks is slightly different. And then you can start to play back, okay, let's look at lease operating expense and LOE. Well, operator one, that one up in Northeast PA, everything's so local, they probably have a much lower water handling cost than, say, for example, the Western PA, where now we're seeing that, geospatial broad extent of where they're shipping their water. And so you can really start, using geospatial maps to show how things change, for example, with LOE. So now we'll wrap up the talk here kind of with some of my, experience and thoughts and ideas about independent employment, kind of coming from an operator. And so some traits that if you're thinking about stepping out and doing your own consulting, that I think you need to, really step back and consider before doing this. As an independent employee, you have to have that curiosity and desire to learn. You're going to have to adapt new skills and continue to learn and stay up with things and talk and keep getting out there. The other thing is, you have to be an independent worker. You have to be able to motivate yourself to continue working, on your jobs, getting them wrapped up. You're not going to have a manager there to tell you, hey, this is the timeline, it needs to be done. And then be open to share your ideas. You're going to have to get out, speak at events, go out, talk to other professionals, because if you're not sharing your ideas, you're not learning, feedback from others, you're not continuing learning and also being a resource for others to come to. And then, accept challenges. You're going to have to work on projects that are outside your comfort zone. You're going to have to learn how to apply things that you've done in the past for a specific job into a new job that maybe you haven't necessarily done exactly, but you can make those steps and you step into those and continue to grow with that. And then, at least personally, I feel, I needed to have that financial safety net in place, either from a past job or, it doesn't even have to be necessarily savings. It can be earning income from a second side job, or if you have a significant other or family help. But, for me, I needed to have that financial safety net in place before really stepping in, because you're not going to have, instant money coming in from your consulting job. And now, but overall, even if you have all those things in place, it is not an easy transition. And other things you need to understand and pick up and learn, you have no insurance benefits, you have no 401k, there's no IT department. And so, I spent more time looking at insurance than I ever thought I would, because you don't have the HR to help you. And an IT department, if you've got a consulting job that needs done by the end of the week, and now you have issues with licensing on ArcGIS online or something, well, you need to figure that out quickly, because you can't pick up the phone and call your IT guy. Maybe you're calling Esri or figuring out the problem on your own. But that's just something you have to keep in mind, that you don't have as many resources as you had in the corporate environment. And then, your work assignments, as you don't have a management with the manager giving you that timeline, he's also not delegating you work from the company. And so now all your work assignments are self-derived. And so, more often than not, you're spending more time trying to get that work. So you're spending more time on an unpaid assignment than you are doing work for a paid client. And so you're going to be doing a lot of marketing, speaking, networking, and have to understand that everything you're putting out and doing is a reflection of yourself and your business, and trying to get those work assignments coming in. And I mean, it's a lot of work to just get started. But there are a lot of advantages to this too. Now you're solely responsible for your own advancement. You're not worried about a promotion within the company. You're not confined to your smaller role, because now the company's constraining capital and they're not growing. And so now it's all about you and how far you can take yourself. And a big part of that then is the ability to pivot to new skills as well. And the advantage to that, though, is now you can focus on topics that are interesting to you and will drive your growth even higher. And with that, you can branch into multiple fields. You're not solely focused necessarily on oil and gas. You can be working on coal. You can be doing solar geothermal. You can get into real estate. I mean, there's so many different ways you can pivot into different environments. And, as a consultant, a lot of times you have flexibility in location and time of when you're working. And so that can really help with balance of work and your family obligations. But, that's not always the case, because, you still often will have client projects that require specific timelines. And so, if you have something ongoing that you need to get done, or it's time dependent, you still may miss your son's soccer game or your daughter's softball game, stuff like that, because of, now it's solely relying on you. You can't have your colleague fill in for you for that half hour. And so, that also leads to then an interaction with a wide variety of professionals. So you're not necessarily only talking to your geoscience core group in your company. You're expanding out and meeting with people within the industry, outside the industry, doing things in the industry that you were really never exposed to. And so, it can be a very exciting and fulfilling environment. And so with that, I would like to thank EnerGIS for inviting me here, the committee, Harold for reaching out to me, and encourage you to check out mudrockenergy.com. I have different presentations, updates, the weekly rig update, some newsletters, and then other maps and reports. And then I also have my contact information here if you want to reach out. You have questions about, starting consultancy, or anything in general in the industry you just want to talk, you can feel free to reach out. And again, thank you all for being here, listening to me today. And I look forward to some live Q&A questions here. Thank you.